On February 14th, 1987, my husband and I attended a wedding for good friends of ours. It was initially a beautiful wedding. I remember looking at my husband lovingly as they were exchanging vows. Good friends of ours were sitting in front of us in their pew. Then, without notice, I suddenly began to feel odd, and I was scared. I had a distinct feeling that I was dying, and I am not one to make a scene in public, good God. It was around then that my husband looked at me, and I remember him saying, "Oh my God, you are turning gray, what is the matter?" And I said to him, "I'm not going to make it," and I said that over and over quietly. And then my friend turned around and saw me. I remember that, and she was just wide-eyed and horrified. I looked like I was dying. I kept praying that I would not make a scene, but my friends wanted to leave the church before what inevitably would happen. And then we were all dismissed, row by row. They came to us next, of course, to stand up and leave or walk out and leave, and I should have just sat there, but again I didn't want to make a scene. I remember feeling completely disembodied, almost at that point, and I had to be helped out. As I reached the threshold of the church, at the entrance where the guests would be, I collapsed, so my body was physically still inside the church. Then the horror and the terror began. I remember it being very dark, and I remember going very fast. And I do not recall what I saw there, but I was terrified out of my mind. Somehow I was able to pull and claw my way back up to life again. Thinking back, I believe in some ways that I was so scared that I willed myself back to life. When I came to, I remember being near the guest book, and all the people were looking down at me, and I was horrified. I remember meeting the eye of my girlfriend, and at that moment, I was gone. I recall being disinvited from my body. I don't believe that I could see everybody, but I most certainly could hear everything that was going on. I recall all the words and what everybody was saying, and I recall mostly being so annoyed and irritated that these people were bugging me. I felt so safe, so secure, a feeling I have never felt in my whole life. One of the members of the wedding party began to do CPR on me, and I remember being completely irritated again. However, I did come to, and I was down outside the church on the stairs on the side of the church. Once again, I opened my eyes, and then again, just as fast, I was whisked away. This time I could not hear anything at all, and I knew somehow that I was being shown delicate and beautiful things, or softness and wonderfulness, and I was being raised to a place of wonderful light. And I can tell you that never in my life have I ever felt so secure, so safe, and loved. We then came to a stop, and there I stood beside my Heavenly Father. Interesting to note, never in my life had I ever used such an expression. As I stood there with my Heavenly Father, suddenly from far, far, far away, the voice screamed out and pierced whatever it was, screaming, tell me, please don't leave me, I love you, please don't die." The voice ripped through time and space, screaming, Tammy, please don't die, I love you, please don't die." It was then that I turned to my Heavenly Father and said to him, I can't leave him. It was then that I was returned to my body. That does it for our first experience, moving right along into our second experience. On October 23, 2015, I collapsed at home due to massive pulmonary embolisms 5 weeks after complete knee replacement surgery. I coded when the ambulance reached the hospital emergency, and 3 more times after that. The ICU doctors and nurses worked on me for 95 minutes. They were preparing to call time of death when one of the doctors found a faint pulse, which I managed to maintain. I was in the ICU for 7 days and in the rehabilitation section of the hospital for 7 more days. During my experience, I was in complete darkness. There was a man dressed in white standing next to me on my right side. At the end of the darkness was a circle of light. In the light, people were milling around. They seemed to be going on with their lives as if nothing was wrong. It reminded me of when my mother would leave the hallway light on at night so my sisters and I wouldn't be afraid to go to sleep. This light was much brighter and more intense. As I tried to focus on the man standing next to me, his face began to become clearer. I had a strange feeling of not so much fear as despair. As his face began to come into focus, I believed I had been kidnapped by a Klingon. I was on a spaceship, and they were taking me far away from my family. I remember my heart being so heavy with sadness, as if I had lost someone close and dear to me. The thought of never seeing my husband, children, and grandchildren was almost too much for me to bear. As my despair grew, the man placed his hand on my right arm. His face began to become even clearer. He had long, stringy brown hair and the blackest eyes I have ever seen. I could feel the calm. He spoke to me, but I don't remember his mouth moving. I could hear him say, "You have to fight, Deianne. We'll take care of you." My next memory was waking up in the ICU with my husband and son standing beside my bed. I was intubated and had my nose packed because of bleeding. My hands were tied to the bed rail to prevent me from pulling my breathing tube. On December 19th, 2015, my husband had prepared lunch. I made my way from the bedroom to the kitchen table. It was laundry day, so my husband was in and out of the laundry room off the kitchen. I hadn't thought about what he was watching on television until the show caught my attention. My husband returned to the kitchen table and noticed tears streaming down my face. Of course, he asked what was wrong now. Since my surgery, my emotions have been all over the map. I have always been able to cry at the smallest things, but now it was almost every day. Television commercials, birthday cards, you name it. I pointed to the television, and with my voice cracking, I explained the person on television was my Klingon. My husband took a seat in his chair as he explained he was watching a documentary titled Jesus, The Lost 40 Days. The image of Jesus was a 3D reproduction taken from the marks on the Shroud of Turin. He told me he had tried to tell me when I was in the hospital the man in my room was an angel. I was insistent he was a Klingon. I couldn't say anything. I ate my soup, letting the moment sink in. My thoughts were all over the place. This would be the first of many pieces of the puzzle explaining what happened to me. I didn't just die. I was taken to the gates of heaven, and Jesus comforted me there. He gave me a choice to go with him or to stay. As he listened to my heart, he could feel the despair and sadness at the thought of me leaving my husband, kids, and grandkids. He let me return with the knowledge that everything would be all right. That does it for our final experience. Do you guys believe that Tammy from our first experience stood beside God? Do you believe that Deianne met Jesus and confused him for a Klingon? I think that with the blackest eyes part, it wasn't Jesus, but a demon posing as him. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to reading everyone's thoughts. Until next time, stay safe and continue to be blessed.